all those out there, I'd like to welcome you to this session. Is called Law in Action, and we want to tell you a bit about the clinic, and we also want to give you the chance to try and work on some inquiries. And so when we say law in action, we mean action for you as well. And so I hope you all have a chat button that's available to you. And later on, we'll be making use of the chat button. But if I could ask people not to send chat about getting involved and how to join up at the moment, because we're going to cover that in a bit. And so we will tell you when to start chatting and when to start polling. And so my name, I should have said that at the beginning, really. My name is Graham Tegg, and I'm the director of Kent Law Clinic. And I have with me two solicitors from the clinic, Viv Gamblin and Phillipa Bruce. And we'll be trying to conduct this session as smoothly as possible. And we also, I want to stress, to make it as interactive as possible. So as opposed to just talking at you, we're going to get you to do some participation, but don't worry about it. It's not like kind of bad participation. And so I just wanted to say something about the Kent Law Clinic to start off with. And so you might have realized that lots of universities with law schools have law clinics, and I think there are over 100 now dotted across the country. But I want to say, even though I would say that, wouldn't I, that Kent Law Clinic is the premier law clinic in the country, because amongst other things, it's the first proper law clinic in the country. And we have a unique, I think, model that we use here. And that is that we have academics and solicitors who help run the clinic. We take on cases, we use local solicitors and barristers to volunteer to advice sessions. And most importantly, we try and get as many students as possible involved in things. And we would like to think that we make or create law as much as study it. And so as we go through this, I don't know, some of you might have watched a bit of Glastonbury, and so I could be a bit like Lewis Capaldi, like you might have to help me along during this. And so really, really briefly, law in action to me, or to the clinic, means that the law exists everywhere. It affects our everyday lives, and it just doesn't exist in statutes, in case law, and in textbooks, important though that is. And so law, like they say love is all around us, and law, as it impacts upon people's lives, is probably different from the way in which people who practice law think about it. And we try and put the two things together. And so before I shut up, I will say that the Law Clinic has had and continues to have, and I hope always will have, two equal aims. Aim number one is to provide a free, high-quality advice service to people in Kent, or whether they live or work in Kent, who need legal advice and are otherwise unable to afford it. So that's aim number one. But twinned with that is an equal aim, which is to enhance the legal education of students at Kent who study law. And so the two things merged together is what I would call what we do in the clinic. And so I think I'm going to hand over to somebody else now. That's a seamless segue there. And we'll move on. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just say a little bit about the kind of advice and help that we provide. As Graham says, we provide free legal advice, and we want to target our services to help those most in need. So people who can't afford to pay for their legal advice. So the main areas of law that we cover reflect the kind of problems that people that might affect people on low or modest incomes. And that includes family law matters, housing problems, employment problems, immigration, and welfare benefits. And often we're representing people involved in problems where the person that they have the dispute with is a wealthier or more powerful person than they are, for example, a government department or a large employer. And I think it'll be clearer if we just provide a few examples of the kind of cases that we have been involved with recently. So I'll start with an employment case to tell you about briefly. So the law clinic was contacted by a group of people who worked in a care home, and they suddenly lost their jobs when the care home was closed down without notice. And it was closing because it was in financial trouble. So this was a shock to these care workers. Not only did they lose their jobs, but it was quite emotionally upsetting for them to lose contact with the residents that they cared for and looked after on a daily basis. And two of our colleagues took up their case for a group of 22 clients altogether, and they took actions to the Employment Tribunal to recover compensation for those residents and ex-employees. So I'll hand over then to Phillipa, perhaps to say a bit about a family case. I might chip in if there's time about another area of law, but over to you, Phillipa.
Thanks, Viv. Okay, so as Viv just mentioned, I'm the family solicitor in the clinic, and family law is probably one of the areas that we get most inquiries about. And there are certain reasons for that, things that have happened in the past 10 years or so in England and Wales that have really impacted upon people's ability to get advice. So we're very lucky that we try and kind of have this service and help as many people as possible. I was in court yesterday representing a grandmother who is involved in a family case. And in fact, I've got two cases that are very similar, because I'm in court again on this Monday coming for the other grandmother. And in both of those situations, what's happened is that they are now caring for a child, or in the other case, two children, where the parent that child lived with has died. And so they have found themselves having to kind of step forwards and become the primary carer for these children, but they don't have the right legal status to actually make decisions for them. So, sorry, my telephone is ringing, which I'm now going to turn off. So I was in court yesterday acting for a grandmother, trying to get her the legal rights needed for her grandson. And it was a great opportunity for the student who has worked with me this year, helping me to interview the client, helping me to draft all the documents that we sent to the court to make the application. She got to come to court and actually see what happens when you go into the courtroom and see that play out. That case sadly has not finished. We have a respondent on that case who is a father who is not happy with what we're seeking to do and is challenging that. And so I found out this morning that I'm going to be having another hearing on that case in October. And so when we start the academic term in the autumn, there will be some more students that I will ask to come and help me with that case. So things continue on that one. Graham, do you want to say anything about some of the kind of cases you work on?
I will do. What I want to do is to merge two things together, which we do immigration and asylum law, and we do lots of welfare benefits law. And so one of the advantages of our clinic, I would say, is that we can potentially cover the entirety of a client's problem. And so the case I want to speak about is a case, and I only spoke to her last night, and I did say that I was going to mention her case this morning, and she wanted me to say hello to everyone, because she's a very nice person. So hello from the client. And so we received this case one day before the applications to the EU settlement scheme ended. And so the EU settlement scheme was for EU nationals and potential family members to apply to remain in the United Kingdom. But our client comes from Cameroon, and so she wasn't an EU national, and she was a lone parent and with two children who were both Cameroonian as well. And it looked like there was nothing to be done. And so my colleagues, Sheena York and Rick Warren, looked at this case, and they thought, and they suggested to me that there might be the outside chance of an application, because one of the father, one of the children was French, and they had had some involvement. And so we put this application in on spec to the resettlement, the settlement scheme, and we had to put loads and loads of legal submissions. There were students involved with that, as there always are students involved, because one of the things that we looked at and taught was EU rights of residence. And so through this process, it took about 9 months, and she was staying with a friend, going to a food bank, couldn't claim any benefits at all. And we didn't hold out that much hope for the application, but the application was successful. And she sent the most fantastic letter or email to the clinic when we told her that we received notification from the Home Office. And she said, praise God, praise God, praise God, and praise people like yourselves. But, and there's a big but, that she got this status called pre-settled status. She'd stayed with her friend now for 2 years, and she had exhausted her welcome with her friend and her 2 children. And so she was penniless and homeless. And so the status she was granted by the Home Office wasn't sufficient on the basis of how it was granted to enable her to have homelessness assistance and to claim benefits. But I then took the homelessness case, and we challenged the homelessness decision with a really complicated area of EU law. And the local authority, which is Maidstone, which is near where we are in Canterbury, agreed. And so they agreed to accommodate her. And the last bit is that we will have in the next month a hearing at a different tribunal, which is a Social Security Tribunal, about her right to claim universal credit. And so this is the case which looked like, and she'd been turned away by virtually everyone, or all advisors said they had no case at all. And so this would be an example of the clinic being able to take on a case at short notice, use different amounts of resources, also because we had students who were tooled up about this to get some of the work done. And we've had like a fantastic success. And so what I would now like Phillipa to say, if possible, is students, and about how you can get involved. And after we've done that, I think we can begin to see if anyone's alive out there and press the chat button.
Sure. Okay, so you've heard us talking about these quite complicated cases and all these things. It sounds quite I mean, some of the things that you were just saying, both of you then, seem, wow, that's big stuff and lots of kind of very legal terms. But what we do is to work with students very gradually to kind of build things up for them so that they start to get an understanding of the law and how we need to kind of find out more about it. And so these are the different ways in which students can get involved. I've put this PowerPoint on, not because I'm going to bore you with PowerPoint, but because I want to show you some pictures. So if I can get it to move to the next screen, that would be excellent. Here we go. So that's a little bit about the clinic, and what you can see there for the picture is the lovely picture of the clinic building. So that's where Viv and I are sat right now, and that's the we're very fortunate to have this kind of excellent facilities.
There's the inside.
That's the inside. So this is the photo I wanted to get to. So one of the main ways in which we encourage students to get involved in the clinic when they first join the university, and anyone who's a law student at Kent is just welcome to come on and spend some time with us. And we do that by saying, come to the clinic meeting. Okay, and you can see here some photos, and this is our clinic main office. It's also in Viv's background, but I don't know where all those plants went, Viv, because we haven't got those anymore.
Tidy version.
That's the tidy version. We've killed those plants and we've since replaced it with more students. So what you can see is lots of students who come into the clinic. It's incredibly informal, and they're on their feet and they're talking about different things that they're involved in. And so they might talk about a very basic way we approach this is a member of the public calls us, or they fill in our new inquiry form, and we have this inquiry, and then it goes on a journey through the clinic as we try and help the person, and the students go on that journey too. So we often talk about them in these big groups, and we kind of just invite your ideas. We're going to show you how we do that in a little bit, because we've got 2 inquiries for you today. So this is the first clinic meeting of term, and I love this photo. This was pre-COVID, so we had a couple of years where we didn't get to be this close, but those times have now passed, and we will be looking forward in September to bringing as many students as we can into the clinic. We really try to create a sense of community, and no, we probably don't have that number of people in the building at, you know, kind of every day, all day, but it's nice to see the enthusiasm and, you know, the keenness amongst our law students to be involved, and that's what we really enjoy. So the clinic meeting is an excellent way to get involved, but we also, as we've mentioned, take on cases and try to give people advice. Now, apologies for all these photos involving me, but nobody else would give me a picture, so I just look incredibly like, oh, it's me in the photo, but hey ho. So we do loads of different things, one of which Graham's already mentioned, called evening advice sessions. And so what happens here is that our local solicitors and barristers who volunteer their time give advice to a member of the public, and then students observe those sessions. Students kind of act as a liaison for the solicitors of the clinic, because they will then report back to us after the session as to exactly what was said and agreed, and you know, we then have long discussions about whether we think, you know, the person has a good chance in their case. Really interesting. We also run casework groups, so if you have particular interests in some of the areas we've mentioned, immigration, family, housing, welfare benefits, then you can get more specifically involved in groups that will actually work on some cases that we have in the clinic. And then another important option is the clinical option, and these are actual modules that you take for assessed credit. And the images that you can see of the wonderful people that are smiling in the photos with me are all students who have worked with me in the past 2 years on a clinical option. And so the photo that is on of the kind of outside building is stood outside Canterbury Combined Court, where those 2 students came with me to a final hearing, a family law case, and heard evidence being heard in court. And the other photo was taken this week, and that was with a student who has been helping me to prepare 2 cases that I've mentioned to you a few moments ago, the special guardianship cases. And she was a huge help to me on Tuesday, trying to go through all of this evidence that the opponent just turned up with. He came into my office on Monday and gave to one of my colleagues the USB stick, and it had hundreds of images on it, and I had to try and make sense of it. And she was very much involved in helping me do that. So there are just a few examples of the way in which you can get involved. But what we want to do now is to show you what the kind of things you might do actually is. So Graham, do you want to take the lead? I can share the screen and put an inquiry up if that's helpful, but
yeah, to make sure, I'm not sure if anyone is even there. And so you can now press your chat buttons.
Say hello.
Say hello, whether it works.
Yes.
Yay!
Yes.
Hello.
Hello,
This
hello,
is more
hello.
like it. This is more like it. I feel that it's like we've brought people to life.
We have.
Yes. Well, you did tell people not to use it until you gave the gift, gave the
So what's going to
go-ahead.
happen now is Viv and I are going to try really hard to keep our eye on the chat. Graham is going to talk to you about an inquiry that came into the clinic, and we have some voting options that we want you to try and use on this first inquiry, but Viv and I will try and also keep an eye on the chat for Graham, because we need 3 of us to keep control. But it's lovely to hear all of you out there. Hooray.
Right, before we start, just want to say that from small things, big things sometimes grow. And so every single case that we deal with, including the ones we've spoken about, all started off as an inquiry. And so we encourage people to put inquiries via the fill out a form on the, I think it's called the World Wide Web or something. I'm a bit old, I don't really understand these things. And so what we're now going to show you is a genuine inquiry, and it's also one that I want your help with, because I've got to ring this person back. And so this is a genuine, but I've changed the name for obvious confidentiality reasons, but the rest of it is exactly the same. And so we're going to take a look at the inquiry. I think one of my kind colleagues is going to read out the substance of the inquiry, and I want you to initially just think about it. And so This is from Folly Duped.
Okay, shall I read it then?
I will make it big for you, Viv.
So this lady says, Mr. Catch, on multiple occasions whilst we were seeing each other, asked to borrow money to cover things like tools, CSA, train fares, rent, insurance, and things for his children. On each occasion, Mr. Catch promised that he would pay the money back out of his wages. Even after we stopped seeing each other, he still promised I would receive all the loaned money back. To this date, he has only made one payment of £80, and now he refuses to communicate with me. I've taken this matter to the police already, who've recorded this, but they say that beyond this, they were unable to help.
So if I'll give you another minute to look at it, let's try and avoid long silences, but to think about it. And we're all in the same position here, is that we know nothing more about this than having read it. You're in the same position as us. And so let's give you, obviously read while I'm talking. I was found the other day my old cup that I used to drink my tea from, and it's a badly drawn picture of a man standing up and a woman laying down on the floor with a speech bubble coming out of her head, and it says, "Sorry, I fell asleep while you were speaking." And I think that is the kind of danger of me just whispering on. And so in the chat, has everyone had a chance to read this?
Hope so. Right, I'm going to stop sharing so we can see the chat. Fantastic.
Super.
Yes.
One person said yes. I'll take that as everyone. If we could, initially, here's a poll. That was the magic code word for having the poll question.
May we have the first poll question? Oh, there we go.
So this is a really crucial thing, right? Having read this, do you think this is a legal problem at all? And I'd like everyone to participate by saying yes or no. And remember, there's no right answer to this at this stage. You've listened to this or you've read this. So do you think that what Miss Duped is telling us is a legal problem, or it's not even a legal problem at all? It's just a thing that happens in life. And so off you go and vote.
It's so tense. I have no idea what's going to come back.
I think we're going to relieve the EU. I think it's a referendum.
Should we do a countdown?
Give it 5 more seconds and then we'll have a look at the result.
Yes, please. That's still on 5 seconds.
So will the results
Here we go.
magically appear? Yeah.
Great. So 78% said yes. Excellent.
22% said no. So the yeses have it, the yeses have it. But that's not really the end of the story, is it? I'm going to try and press the close button on my screen, which I've successfully done. So I feel inordinately proud of myself. And so now we go, yes, it might be a legal problem. Yes. And so now we've got to think about, what do we think about this? What do we know? And so in the chat, what do people think this actually is? That's a really bad question.
So do you want to ask that question differently?
Yes, but I couldn't think of it.
Well,
this is a Lewis Capaldi moment.
what we could do is, so we've said 78% think it's a legal problem. So we could, we've got a couple more poll questions to try and identify what kind of problem it might be. Should we maybe go to question number 2?
I reckon question number 2 follow on from question number 1 when I think about it. So the client contacted the police. We know that, don't we, from the facts, the limited facts that we know. And so the police suggested to her to contact someone else, but they might be right, they might be wrong. So do you think this is a criminal matter? Yes or no? Here's the poll, yes or no?
Yeah.
So we're assuming it is a legal problem for this purpose. We are, because we voted a legal problem.
And I guess the reason we're asking if it's a criminal matter is because this was her first instinct, wasn't it? Contact the police.
It was.
So, you know, we're starting to get into the mind of our client, you know, and how they tried to solve this problem. Some of you are starting to put some great answers in the chat, and we're not ignoring them. It's going to come, but we've got one more poll question that we want to ask you perhaps before we then really dive into your answers. So should we see what the outcome of that vote is? Okay. 68.
Sorry. Let's all read numbers out loud.
I just think I've got better eyesight than you. I thought I might do that for you.
So 68% said no, it is not a criminal matter, and 32% thought it is a criminal matter.
Okay, so let's explore it a little bit more, because clearly it could be, it might not be. Can we have the final vote?
Is that question 3?
Question 3. So here are some suggestions. What type of legal problem might it be? Family, contract, tort, equity and trusts, or something else?
That's nicely said. It doesn't matter. We're not expecting to know any of these things. We are scrabbling around for ideas at the moment. Family, contract, tort, equities / trust, or something else.
And we're not expecting that you necessarily know what all of those words mean or what all of those areas of law are about, because, you know, that's part of coming to a law school, isn't it, to learn these things?
Yeah, so one person raised their hand, but I'm afraid we have to ask you to put your whatever you want to say in the chat, if possible.
Yes. Okay, let's have a look at the results for question 3. Oh.
Interesting. So all have scored something.
Yeah, great. So most popular was contract, 55%. Then equity and trusts. Tort law and something else coming in equally with 10%. And no one thinking it's family law. Fine. Okay, well, I can be quiet for a while, can't I? It's not going to be family. Okay.
Now, can we begin to, I tried to do this, but I've singularly failed to achieve this. But I can see there are lots of different things in the webinar chat. So could we refer to some of these things that people have said maybe? It's like closing the screen every time I touch the screen.
Okay, so one person said this is a legal problem because it involves money. Mm-hmm. And similar to that, or along those lines, somebody says it's a financial civil dispute. There's one view that no contract has been made, but somebody else has suggested that a verbal contract has been made. So slightly different takes on it. So what do you think, Graham? What do you make of those responses?
They're very good and very interesting responses. In response to the responses, I would get us to think. I honestly don't know confidently what the answer is to this inquiry. And so one of the reasons why I brought this forward is because I've got to ring the person back, and it looks like it should be completely simple. You would think like 1,000 years of the common law, or like hundreds of years. And so this must have happened to everyone lots of times, which is you form a relationship with somebody, you think love is in the air, everything's going hunky-dory, what's mine is yours, what's yours is mine, of course I'll help you, and then love breaks down, things become difficult, and then you have to like think, well, and then suddenly people become kind of legal, and that's mine, I didn't really give you that, I didn't really mean that. And so you would think the law could deal with this completely straightforwardly, but the reason why I've mentioned it is because the law can't. And so it's interesting if it involves money, it involves the law, I'm interested by that, but I haven't got anything particular to say about it. I think it's definitely not a criminal matter, it's not a crime. I'm 100% confident of this, that if for something to be a crime, there has to be on the statute book as a crime, such as theft or deception or fraud. And I don't think any of the things are made out here. So whoever said, or whoever thinks it's a civil matter, then whatever kind of legal pie it might be, it will be a civil legal matter. And so we went through a series of different suggestions. And so before we move on, I kind of thought like, so what's happened here is that our client has lent money. That's what we're saying. She seems to say that she's lent the money because she used lend and borrow. And he knew that it was lending and borrowing, according to her account, because he's going to pay her back. And so there's some form of promise or communication or reliance in that. And then he's also, the thing I'm particularly interested in is the implication that she carried on lending him money after they split up. Because it says that even after we split up, you know. Like,
oh no, I think what she's saying is that he promised to pay. You know, even after we split up, he said that. I think that's what it meant. There is a question raised. Somebody says a verbal contract is still a contract, isn't it? So Graham, can you have a verbal contract?
You can most certainly can have a verbal contract, and you can form contracts verbally, and you can do them in writing, and you can form them formally. But the law would say that the requirements for a valid contract, whether it's verbal or whether it's in writing, have to be met. And so there are some basic principles which you'll have the joy of learning about. And so it's two parties who have come to an agreement. You can discern what the agreement is, and some consideration, which is what you'll spend weeks if you study law, about what is consideration. So normally is that if you do A, I'll do B, kind of thing. Like, I'll pay £100 to clean the windows, and the consideration is cleaning the windows. So in this situation, there's no obvious consideration here, because I'll just lend you the money, I might pay it back in the future, isn't classic consideration. There's also another point here where the contract law and the common law is completely keen not to get involved in family and personal disputes. And so there's this theory which is called intention to create legal relations. And so if as I did say to my children quite often, I'll give you £5 if you mow the lawn, and then they mowed the lawn, but they annoyed me, and I changed my mind. They weren't able to argue that there was a valid contract there, even in case all the other things were there, because there was no intention to create legal relations. And so the contract side of things, I think, is slightly difficult, but it doesn't mean to say that's the end of it. Now, we did put up this word tort, and we did put up equity and trust. And so does anyone know what tort is? I mean, it doesn't matter if you don't know, but if you do know, you could type out what you think a tort is.
Oh, a civil wrong. Wow, that was quick.
Have you been dying just the chance to say that?
So we've got civil wrong and civil matters. Yeah, civil dispute.
Tort just means wrong in French.
And somebody said a civil wrong based on negligence, injury or harm to another person. a cause seeking to resolve a disadvantaged party and infringement of a right. So some of them are saying a similar thing.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically right. So it's wider than negligence. And so negligence is an example of a tort, but nuisance is a tort. Assault and battery at common law are torts. And some exist, this thing called the common law, and some of them are created by statute. And so like causing a public nuisance is a statutory wrong. Some people would say that discrimination cases, like when laws against racial and sexual and sexuality discrimination are creating statutory torts. It's saying if you do this, it's wrong, and it's a remedy there where a court will recognise. The difficulty with this one is that it's not an obvious tort. And then we enter into the murky world, the murky world of equity and trusts, which that swamp we're not going to fall deep down into. And so what the English and Welsh courts did over a period of, like I say, 500, 600 years is when the strictures of the common law were too narrow and they thought this led to an unfair result, they developed this idea of a court of equity, and equity is about it's discretionary remedies and it's about fairness. And so in these kind of situations, the person, in order, if they had to go to a court, would have to have the cause of action. So they'd have to say, they have to pin their colours to the mast, but you can pin you can pin lots of colours to the mast and go, I think it might be a quasi-contract. It could be like the tort of conversion of money, whatever, or it could be restitution, or it could be a form of equity because it's a promise. It could be some form of restitution. So you do all of this, and then you put your case, the facts in it, and then what we would be doing, and this is what you will do at the clinic if you are involved in the clinic, is we create the legal arguments. You make the legal arguments, and you don't know whether it's going to be successful, because one of the things that I want to stress is that studying law is very interesting and a noble pursuit, but I think that lots of the cases, and the vast majority of legal cases, revolve on the facts. And if you go back and you are the expert on the facts, and so you can be, as a student, the world's expert on the facts of your client's case, even though you might not. Sorry, Viv, carry on.
Oh, no, it was just along those lines, actually. I just want to acknowledge that one of the contributions earlier was, but there's no proof of it apart from both parties' testimony. So facts and evidence. Really. So it's just making the point about the evidence.
Great. Go on.
No, go on.
And so in this, so what we would need to do is, and what I will do, is have to ask her loads more questions about what happened, about the amounts of money, about what was said. It could have been that she made a list and put down in writing. And so the more you could evidence it, the more likely it is that a court would support what you were saying. Or it could be that he's going to say, but I lent her loads of money and did this, and it's all quid pro quo and things. And so we're at the very early stages there. But that just goes to show is that we get someone coming in, and then your mind goes crazy kind of for a bit, thinking, what could this be? What could this be? What could this be? And quite a lot of times is the inquiries don't admit of any easy answer. Once you know what the legal problem is, and you've matched it to the facts, I'm going to claim that it's really quite a simple matter then to sort out this first difficult bit.
Yeah, I think what you've done there, Graham, is to explain a lot about how we spend quite a lot of time just brainstorming and thinking about what it might be, what law it might be. But the other thing you mentioned there was how obsessed we get with what the facts are and what we know and what we don't. So why don't we look at the second inquiry that we've got? Because I think this is a really good example of what we know and what we don't know, and we might want to ask for some contributions to that. So let me pop the second one up, and hopefully everybody can see Mr. Incy Wincy.
Very good.
And here are the details of this one. Shall I read this one out?
Go ahead.
I had to leave my flat. I was being continuously bitten by false black widow spiders whilst I slept. Apologies to all of those of you who are not fans of spiders. This should have come with a warning. The housing association, who are called Clarion, wouldn't do anything about it. I even went to the newspapers. The news article can be found online by searching "Man bitten hundreds of times due to false widow infestation." I was so scared of sleeping at the flat, I left and moved into a tent in the woods. The council are saying that I owe them money and cannot bid on any properties until I pay them back. I think Clarion should pay the overpayment as the payments went straight to them. So we'll just give you a minute to read over that, because there's some terms in there that just might be good to give you a chance to think about. Okay, hopefully everyone's had a chance to read that. So we've got an infestation of black widow, false black widow spiders, not actual black widow spiders, because, you know, that would also be terrifying. Here we are. Oh.
Right. So again, this is completely, if you Googled it, you would find it.
You mean the press report? The press report.
So this is a real case, and it has been on Sky News. It's on the BBC website. There are lots of articles in the Sun and Daily Mirror, as well as Kent Online, with pictures of the man covered in spider bites, including a bite to his upper lip.
Please stop.
Right.
Let's not.
That's
Don't be graphic.
Okay.
Actually, that sounded far worse, Viv, because he was only about to say lip, and you and I made it sound like it was something far more serious.
It was what Graham was saying earlier that concerned me. Anyway, let's go on.
I've done nothing wrong. So, as everyone's had a chance to read this, now I think there is a lot of information in there, and there's a lot of things we might know and we do not know. And so I would like anyone to write in the chat kind of from that thing that we've got, what they think happened.
Yeah, okay. What happened?
Or just list the facts that we do know. So people can contribute one or more facts, rather than write out a long paragraph.
Okay, very true. That was a silly way of doing it.
No, it's good. It's good. It's like who's got the fastest typing.
Do you want me to read? Okay, go.
Yeah, no, go, Viv.
Okay, so we've got a man was bitten repeatedly by a false black widow.
Just the one's aberration spider.
Took Clarion to court. The property owner was contacted and no improvements were made. That's what we've got so far.
More facts, more things, please.
Okay. Occupier's liability. Somebody jumping to the law.
Stick with the facts.
Yep. The man had to resort to sleeping in a tent. Very good.
Well done, Elena.
More. There's more there. Yeah.
So, and the council claims that he owes them money. Yep. So that's quite a few of the facts.
Good.
Yeah. So now, I know this is negative, putting it negatively, but having looked at it and thought about it, what don't we know? Like, what obvious questions, what would you want to ask this person that's in front of you? You could say that I am Spider-Man for this situation. So what further questions would you want to ask me to find out actually what happened? Please.
So as everyone starts to type, I think this is the bit that we enjoy most about working on cases, isn't it? Is thinking of what further questions we want to ask. And what often happens in the clinic is that we will ask the students to then ring the client back and ask these further questions so that we can learn more about what's happened.
I can answer the first question. Over a year.
Should we read the question out, because not everyone can see it?
Sorry.
How long did you put up with the conditions?
How long did you put up with the conditions? For over a year.
How often, okay, let's have a timeline. How often has it happened? How long has it been going on for? So you've answered that one. A new question is, how many times did you bring this matter to the tenant's attention, and has your problem been dismissed? Yep, sorry.
No, carry on.
Was there any correspondence between the parties? How much money is owed to the council? And what was the agreement made with the property owner on the conditions of the home?
Super.
So could you help us with any of those, Graham? Do you know? Oh, sorry, Spider-Man.
Thank you. Well, is it Peter Parker? Is that Spider-Man? Yeah. Well, that's an important clarification there. I can say that I moved into the property, the housing association property, and I started getting bites. I couldn't understand why I started getting bites. And 9 months later, I was with my sister, and she said to me, I've looked up about these bites, and I think they are false black widows. And we looked on Google, and we looked at the shape of the bites, and that's what they were. And I realized that this is what the reason was. And so after months of going through it, I phoned up the council and said, there's an infestation, I think, of false black widow spiders, and I get bitten like virtually every night, and I can't sleep. And I told my housing officer, and they said that they weren't really, is that one, they kind of were disbelieving, and second, they said it wasn't really, they would try and help me, but it wasn't clear how they were going to help me. And it got so bad is that I left for the woods. Has that helped at all?
It has helped, because someone was just asking about, you know, your emotional well-being, and so we can see quite poor because you decided to sleep outside.
I can say, yeah, I can say that as, and this is a quote that appeared from me in the papers, is that I have to hold myself together to stop myself from falling apart.
Okay. So there's a couple of other contributions about asking whether there were any warnings in the contract before you moved into the property, and whether you were made aware of any potential risks. And also, did you have any insurance yourself? So these questions are sort of moving towards, hang on, you know, what are the legal issues that might be engaged here?
I had no warnings that there was an infestation of false black widow spiders. I had no idea about it. And so that I thought the property would be a good new start for me, because I'd finally got a housing association flat, and so everything was good. So there was no warnings, and so I didn't think there was any potential risks.
Okay. Right, so I'm looking at the time, it's now 2:49.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I don't know if there's any more questions that you want to ask our brilliant audience about this inquiry. You know, perhaps.
Really, I know I've got to speed up. Please, go on.
We could ask, is there a practical solution to this? Is there a legal solution? Is there a practical solution? I mean, Graham, do you want to comment on that? Because I'll keep an eye on the chat. But yeah, we may not have that much more time.
Right, okay, right, I'll speed through. So I'm going to leave aside the black widow spiders, the false black widow spiders for now. They are verified. They are black widow bites. So we've done that. And so the crucial thing, and this is what I did this when I came across it. I was obsessed by the spider bites and things. What the man is asking, what's happened is that he says his flat became uninhabitable and he couldn't live in it anymore. And so he left it, he moved out. And so under a tenancy agreement, he's not living there anymore. And so the issue is about how the rent is going to be paid. And so this man, his rent was paid by the benefit system, and he was paid by housing benefit. And so he moved out, but this is the bit that's really unclear. He wasn't there anymore. And he said he didn't want the property anymore. He's really angry and he's quite shouty, I think, at the housing office. And so he left the property. I'm not clear about what he left in the property or how he went about leaving here, but housing benefit, which was the local council, didn't know he left and carried on paying the housing association the rent. And so now that when the council found out, the council said, we shouldn't have paid your rent because you weren't living at the property, and therefore that you've got to pay us back £4,000 for the rent that we paid at the property. And he's saying, I shouldn't have to pay the rent back because I wasn't living at the property. And anyway, the money went to the housing association, and the housing association were in the wrong, and they should pay you the money back. But if they pay him the money back, then they might chase him for the rent. And so this case is more involved than we thought, I think, or when I looked at it, I thought, and I must admit, we've done it quite wryly, but there are kind of more parties that are involved. And so I spoke to him really, really briefly. And again, it's something that I will look into further. So before we end, have you got any more comments on this case? Because again, your ideas are probably better than my ideas, or as good as my ideas. And the practical solution is, of course, he could have contacted the pest control thing and got someone to come and deal with the infestation.
Absolutely. Someone has just commented that very thing. Has he tried fumigating or calling pest control?
Yeah. So that was running through my mind. Was there a more practical solution? Obviously, this has culminated in a huge, much bigger problem and financial repercussions to it. So I just wonder whether anyone suggested to him a practical solution, but obviously it's too late at this stage.
Yeah.
To be honest, in my conversation with him, I didn't raise that because I thought that it would be almost it could
too late.
Kind of thing. You know what we should have done, mate, is you should have stopped.
Well, I think what it shows is that a lot of the time in the clinic that we have as many conversations about non-legal solutions to problems as we do about legal solutions. So sometimes when we're helping our clients, what we're actually trying to find for them is the solution that's best for them, or perhaps quickest to actually alleviate the issue. And so we do sometimes have to think around it, don't we? And Graham, you in particular love a case that, you know, sometimes we can look to other places other than what the law says to try and find solutions.
So I think that we've flogged this as much as we can do. I would really like to thank you for your participation, and also that the fact is that you are clued in and you're beginning to ask the right questions. And so asking the right questions and inquiring is like 90%, I think, of being able to do this. And so all I'm going to say goodbye now is that
well, I've got a few things that I just will say.
I know, but that's not, I didn't say goodbye for everyone. Is that if you were interested and this has piqued your interest, it is a way of understanding the law and laws and how it works that is different but complementary to the formal study that you would do. So it's one thing to study contract law, tort law, public law, different aspects of law. But if you study law from the basis of as it happens, because when you look at textbooks, when you look at cases, it's already happened and it's been nicely ordered. We're dealing with the thing before it's ordered. And so when you can see those two things together, then you can, it's for some people, maybe many students, not only do they enjoy trying to help people, but they get a firmer insight and they go, I actually understand now what that principle of property law means, or I began to realize what the limits of this kind of contact thing is. So thank you very much. And I really hope that at some point we can meet in person, we can see each other in the law clinic, and you could be one of those people standing on a chair at one of our meetings, health and safety permitting.
Thanks, Graham. So just going back to our slideshow, just to because it has a few things that will help to finish us off. Sorry, I'm not obsessed with my picture. It's just refusing to move on to the next screen. Hey. So this just really summarising the things that Graham's been talking to you about. You remember right at the beginning, we talked about our dual aims, helping members of the public and enhancing our students' education. Hopefully you've seen how we kind of go about that. And as Graham's just said, there's rarely any ready-made answers to people's legal problems. And so we just spend a lot of our time trying to look for answers. And there's so much more to just reading all of those textbooks and statutes and judgments, and working with our clients is just a wonderful way that we manage to really enrich your understanding of the law. So if you want to learn a little bit more about us in particular, we do our very best to maintain what's called Clinical, and it's our blog where we try and talk about some of the cases, the successes, the things that we've had going on in the clinic. And so the web link is there, but you'll also find it if you just search Kent Law Clinic blog from Google. And these are the ways in which you can keep up to date with what's going on across the law school, because this is a very vibrant and very dynamic law school, and there is always new things happening. So lots of different ways to find out more. And finally, to say that this was the first summer of law, but it doesn't need to be your last experience. And so if you have enjoyed today and would like to carry on learning some more, then on the 6th of July, you could come back and learn about Law in the Making, Homelessness. And our very own Vivien Gambling will be back with her colleague Karen Tunica, who will be talking more in depth about homelessness law. So from all of us, a massive thank you. Graham said it better, but I'll say it again. You know, thank you ever so much for joining us.
Yep, thank you. Hope to see some of you next week.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you. And thank you to all the nice comments that are now coming through.